So welcome everybody to another Wellness Wednesday. My name is Riley Pimentel, and of course I'll be your host for the hour. From all of us in the training department, we just want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to be here, and Tara as well for all your time and efforts that are going into this presentation. We are very, very grateful to have the platform to be able to share important messages that are related to wellness, and we've got an amazing topic and speaker today. Before I pass the floor over to Tara, I do want to go over some housekeeping items. Our session today is going to be recorded and it will remain muted just to allow for a smooth flow of the presentation. We do, of course, welcome any questions you may want to ask, so please go ahead and feel free to use the chat and ask away. We will be saving questions towards the end of the presentation, and as well, just to let you guys know, if you have to bow out for any reason, the recording of the webinar will be accessible on the SBI Team Hub. Finally, the views expressed by speakers or other third parties in these webinars are those of the speaker or third party and not necessarily that of Storage Vault Canada. So with that covered, I am very excited to introduce our guest speaker for today. Her name is Tara Boothby, and she is a registered psychologist and clinical director at Sojourn Psychology. Tara has worked at Sojourn Wellness Group as a psychologist, supervisor, and case manager for 15 years. In the past, she's also instructed courses at Grant MacEwan University and the University of Alberta. She also posts often on Sojourn's YouTube channel. If anybody is interested in checking that out, on your off time, just go to YouTube, search up Sojourn, and you'll see it right there. You might also recognize her if you're out in Alberta from CTV. She recently did an interview about her book called Love and Love's Energy, which is related to our presentation today. Tara's treatment focus is very broad, but does include a number of areas. I'll just mention a few. She covers marriage and premarital counseling, attachment, conflict management, communication, emotional regulation, and family counseling, just to name a few. So today we're going to take a look at love and love's energy, what that means, and how it translates into self-love. As we go along, please feel free to type out any questions that you might have for Tara, and we'll be more than happy to address those at the end of the presentation. So Tara, thank you so much. Welcome to Wellness Wednesday, and please go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you, Riley. And Riley, if you want to try and figure out, work some magic to see if we can make my camera appear. I can't figure anything else out on my end, but if all of a sudden I show up, then that's fine by me.
No problem. We're just glad that you're here, and I'll try and do some troubleshooting while you're
Sure.
giving your presentation.
Awesome. So I will try to keep it as dynamic as possible, you guys, and hopefully inspire you guys to think about yourself and how to better take care of yourself and your relationships with others as well as yourself. And I'm just going to do some self-care right now and stop thinking about the camera because I so want to fix it. But self-love. So Love and Love's Energy is a book that I have written, and it's just come out March 29th, 2024. It's broken down into 3 categories, really. And the first space that I like to encourage people to start considering what love is by noticing ourselves, what self-love is. And I will make this grand statement to say that self-love is really understanding that we are whole people and we are wholly loved. It's a hard thing for us to think about. It's a hard thing for us to figure out how to actually believe that I am a whole person, a complicated person, a person who has some good, some bad, some flawed stuff, some fabulous stuff, and yet I am loved and I am included just as other people are. So we are all people like everybody else. And sometimes we are good and sometimes we are bad. And that is something that gets us a little wobbly. Like when my bad stuff shows up, or my stuff that I don't like about me, when my stuff shows up that other people don't like about me, that's a place where we can try to hide ourselves away, to try and figure out a formula to present to the world. I'll call it a default system, because eventually these behaviors we want to put out there for everybody else to see, they become automatic. And we get disconnected from our inner self, from our inner emotions. And so what really informs some of our inner stuff that gets us wobbly. So when I say wobbly, I just mean that emotionally we're not certain, right? I feel insecure about who I am on the inside. And then I have a hard time expressing my whole self or coming into situations, trusting that I belong to be there. I deserve to be in relationship with others, no matter what truth is really inside of me, that I am a whole person, both flawed and fabulous. Now, our flawed places, some of those things that we might not necessarily like about who we are, some of those things that have gotten us into trouble in past relationships, or some of those things that are the result of injuries that others have done to us or life circumstances. A word that Riley and I were talking about that is connected with all of this inner space inside of us is trauma. Trauma is a pretty complicated thing, but it's really important when we're evaluating what is self-love, what is self-care, and why is it actually really hard to do an authentic, good job of caring for our inner self. Well, there's trauma. And we'll break trauma down into two categories often. We'll talk about big T trauma and little t trauma. But it's not that easy to define. So trauma is always like a life-defining event. And for some people, that can be big, major events, like global scale events that cause us inner anxiety and angst and arousal. Or it can be small events that might seem insignificant to somebody else, but for some reason they get us feeling anxious, stressed, it's stuck in some of our arousal. And so it's a sort of curious perspective of our inner world and how our body and how our inner being, our whole self, has viewed some things as traumatic, some of those things that we view as are unacceptable events or circumstances that we faced, these things that we try to hide away and maybe protect ourselves from other people. Sorry, I just heard somebody for a second. Just fine. Yeah, so trauma is subjective. It looks different for different people, and it is stored differently for different people. Sometimes we'll talk about our trauma container and how inside of us we all have a different capacity for what we can tolerate or not tolerate. And sometimes we have a different view of what is acceptable or what is unacceptable. So some of us might have a larger space or a larger threshold for life events that are uncomfortable, and some of us have a smaller threshold or a smaller container for events that are uncomfortable. Those life defining, what is life defining for me is subjective. And I wanted to use my hands to show a bit of a metaphor, but I'll try to paint a word picture with this as well. There's a neuropsychologist out of Australia. Her name is Dr. Carolyn Leaf. And I really love the way that she talks about thought or memory in the brain. So our healthy memory, our healthy thoughts that are stored, they can look like, actually they look like trees. So you can think of like a big tree, it's taller and there's some branches, some sort of neural branches off of this thought spot in our brain. Whereas trauma is shorter and it is more intertwined, kind of like a thorny bush. Or if we're going to choose a good metaphor, like maybe one of those, what do they call them? Those like dust, oh, there's a term for it, but the things that roll across the desert, somebody can write it into the chat, where they're thorny and they're sort of twined up, uncomfortable. And tumbleweed, yes. So you think of a tumbleweed, and trauma can look like that actually in images that they look above the brain. And it's hard for us then, if you think of trying to touch memories, this beautiful tree that we could even imagine, if it's possible, I don't think so, but a tree that could sway in a gentle breeze, or it looks beautiful and green, it has foliage in our mind, and it's comfortable to touch. it's comfortable to think on. Whereas a tumbleweed, it's unpredictable, it looks kind of dirty, it's threatening with the little thorny things on it, harder to come up and believe that we could touch it, or to trust that it won't blow up and be uncomfortable in our space. And that's a nice word picture or image for us to hold in our mind's eye of like, this is why trauma is difficult. This is why we can get emotionally wobbly with ourselves and in our relationships. This is what we can feel flawed about as people, and this is what we can then hide away. And another word picture that I like to think about when considering trauma, and hopefully this isn't, I don't think this will be too graphic to share, but you think we all have a stove in our house. And if you, okay, let me see here if my camera will start again. So I don't know if that's working, if my camera turned on, but if it didn't,
It did work.
Did
Hello.
it?
Amazing.
Yay.
Oh, welcome again.
Thank you. Well, way to go, Riley. Way to keep your emotional footing and save the day with the camera. Good on you. Yeah, okay, I'm so excited. That just feels like a little bit less pressure to know that we can enjoy some video and feel more human in our connection. One other metaphor that I like to share about, yeah, it does feel more natural. It feels less strange than looking at this blank screen. Even I'm blank. Another image for trauma. So there's these things that happen in our lives. In our homes, we all have a stove. You think of your stove, and we know as we age, when we're children, we don't necessarily know that a stove could be a bit dangerous. But as you cook and you have more experiences, inevitably we have something happen where we reach to grab something out of the oven and our finger gets a little bit too close to the heat, or we accidentally touch the element or something like that. And when you think of touching heat, however that might happen, or if you drink tea and it's a little bit too hot and hot on your mouth. So I think of it like this, where inside of us, we're full of these little cells. And something bad happens, the first place we realize that is often through our physical body. And then it's like all these little cells are calling out to our brain to say, did that really happen? Did that really happen? And sometimes we have an easier time reconciling it. Yeah, we did. We drank the tea. It was too hot and our mouth is sore. Now we're not actually having that conversation, but some parts inside of us are. There's other times where maybe it's harder for us to slow down and to take the moment to reconcile that with our body. And so maybe burning the roof of our mouth, or nicking our knuckle on the oven, which how many of us have done that multiple times? We might not get slow, and we might not reconcile that pain to help our body. Yeah. So noticing trauma and how trauma links into our fears about who we are on the inside. We're all people, just like everybody else. We all have some level of trauma. Some people have more than others. Most likely, we have very little awareness of what the people around us are weighing in as trauma or flaws inside of them. And that's something that's nice to keep in mind too. There's this whole inner world inside of our friends and our colleagues, and we just don't always know what they're trying to keep inside, and that they're worried other people will find unacceptable about who they are. So moving into, want to talk about like some of the self-care pieces, but more about self-love and our inner being. I wanted to share one more metaphor. This one is something that I put in the book, and if anybody is interested in the Codependency No More literatures, or the AA, NA, any of those beautiful anonymous meetings, this is a metaphor that we often draw on, and I care about it deeply, so I just expanded on it in my book, and it's something we'll talk about is, cleaning up your side of the street. So I'm going to read a couple paragraphs here, I think 3 paragraphs actually. And this is some of how I'm explaining my own process with my side of the street. This is on pages 31 through, I think, 33, kind of broken out over those pages. So when I think of cleaning up my side of the street, I imagine a small town street with two sides, each side with a sidewalk on their side of the roadway. I imagine walking down my side of the street, feeling the fresh air and the sunlight on me. In my mind's eye, I'm rarely cleaning. I am more experiencing and enjoying my clean side of the street. I'm not peeking over to see how the other side of the street looks. I'm living on my side. It is as if I have already done the cleaning up for that day, as if in the memory of the image, I remember having cleaned my side. I think this is because, in my experience, the cleaning happens in my day-to-day noticing and self-actualization, or self-actualizing. Maybe the image allows me to remain hopeful that I can experience a clean side of my street, even though I'm always a bit of a mess, never completely cleaned up. This is some of that talking about noticing those tumbleweeds and instead noticing like how do I look at what is within my power of influence inside of me and how might I make space to take care of those things that are doing well and those things that maybe aren't doing so well. As I already mentioned, in my mind's eye, I view my side of the street as clean, but just earlier today I had a flood of emotion. In full disclosure, I can be riddled with sharp anxiety. All at once, I lost my footing. No one may have known, but my inside world felt upside down. My side of the street, my real estate, became unsafe and a place I did not want to know. How does the clutter of anxiety impact me? I used to chew my nails. I struggle with perfectionism. I'm prone to plummeting self-loathing, so self-hate. At these times, I often avoid people. All at once, I can fall into a negative view of myself and the world around me. I'm better at digging myself out of these times. I'd like to call them moments, but they never feel short-lived when they are my presence. And although I am better at helping myself cope with my inner world, or when my inner world feels upside down, I still get triggered by what is happening in my present circumstances. Something happens, big or small, in my day, and the clutter of my side of the street takes over. My history, my negative thoughts, my flaws can feel piled up and powerful. For me, this presence it presents as anxiety. I'm just noticing some of the ways. So when I talk about real estate, when you think of your side of the street and what it might look like for you, what images come to mind for you of your side of the street? And what does your side of the street actually look like? This is a nice word picture, some of these things to help us make sense of what can be really, really confusing about our brain and our inner body and what actually is going on. My side of the street, and then I notice this term real estate. So on our side of the street, there's also some buildings, there's some sort of structure perhaps, and I view that as part of like our family lineage or life circumstances, that there is structures or there is some scenic pieces in our inner world where this side of the street is. And some of those things are out of our control, like our family circumstances or our life history at times. And some of those things are maybe choices we've made, good or bad. And inside of us, there's all of these parts that can contribute to how well we feel like we can clean up our side of the street, how clean our side of the street tends to feel pretty consistently, and what happens when a dust storm blows through or some sort of tragic weather system just really influences and creates a lot of chaos or dirt. Like when my anxiety shows up. Anxiety is my thing. You guys might have something else that you notice. Like sometimes we'll talk about like with ADD, like a squirrel or just different things that happen. Just a bad day, right? We're grown-ups. We have bad days sometimes. So when we're noticing these metaphors of, you know, how trauma might be in our brain, how that influences the ways that we can view ourselves as flawed, some of the symptoms of our mental health, our side of the street, I'm thinking about self-care and one of the most clinically effective ways that I can. The term that we will use is window of tolerance. Maybe some of you have heard this. So window of tolerance is, I don't even know which school of thought it comes from. It might be CBT. That would make sense, but it's a trauma-informed school of thought as well. And we'll put like a chart where there's an arrow going up and an arrow going down. And at the top of the one arrow, we might say there's hyper. So hyper, arousal, anxiety, and stress is at the top. And at the bottom of this arrow, or we could call this a continuum, is this hypo place. And that very depth is like depressed, exhausted, depleted, burned out. And although we tend to fluctuate up and down at times, we really want to figure out how to create a space close to the center, this window, where at times we might get a little lower and at times we might get a little higher, but we get better at avoiding running outside of what is our measurable and manageable window of tolerance. And within our window of tolerance, this is our zone for wellness, basically. And it's unique to each one of us. It's informed by our life experience, all these things that I've started to talk about. But then what do I do with my window of tolerance? And how do I actually do some self-love, taking care of this space? Oftentimes when we think of oh, I'm going to drive through Timmy's and get a coffee or Starbucks. And I will think of like how many people line up to get their coffee in the morning, they get their coffee, and on the way into work, they don't taste the coffee that they just got to take care of themselves. Or there's other ways that we think we're doing self-care, but we're not really embodying it because we haven't figured out how to be in our window of tolerance. Now, my original research 20 years ago was on the wellness wheel, and you guys are wellness people. So this is going to be kind of in your wheelhouse, which is no pun intended because I'm going to notice the wellness wheel. So we're in your wheelhouse talking about the wellness wheel. And the wellness wheel is an image of basically the categories that can inform our window of tolerance. So this is an interesting, really simple thing. If you want to jot down some easy notes, this might be something that is more applicable for you to do a self-reflection activity on. How do I create my zone, my window of tolerance, so that I take better care of me as a unique person, a whole person who is flawed and fabulous and wholly loved. So the 6 categories of the wellness wheel. The first category is social. And I'll go through this a couple of times so that you guys can get these 6 points. So the first category is social. The second is emotional. The third is intellectual. The fourth is physical. The fifth is occupational. Occupational is all the things we do with our time. And then the sixth is spiritual. And lots of times they'll just draw a circle and then they break it up into 6 categories. Now for my research, what I did was I had the wheel, and inside I had a smaller wheel. So at the center I put spiritual, and then I had the 5 dimensions coming out of it: social, emotional, intellectual, physical, and occupational. Because I believe, I believe we have souls. So that's my personal belief, and that's why it was fitting for me to place that spiritual component at the center. And when we look at each 6 dimension of the wellness wheel, then we can evaluate ourselves. Who am I as a unique individual, as a social being? And part of my self-love and my self-care is understanding what helps me when I feel dysregulated. Is a time in going to help me with people, or a time out? Which friends, which family, what clubs or unique groups I'm a part of that are going to put some gas in my tank? They're going to help me to feel like I'm in my window of tolerance. So within my window of tolerance, what are my social ingredients? The people, the events, those things that just really help me feel like I am a part of a community, and it is helping me to stay within that window in my zone of wellness. Emotionally, one of the simplest tools with the emotional dimension is how am I going to take a daily practice or spend some time to connect and say, how am I doing? How am I feeling on the inside? How does it feel in my body when anxiety shows up? How does it feel in my body when I get sad? How does it feel in my body when the tears are stuck inside of me? And how does it feel in my body when I let the tears out and afterwards my hot brain cools down? Because that happens. Tears are one of the fastest ways to cool down a hot brain. So how am I doing? How does it feel in my body? How does my body start talking? Again, thinking of those little cells that are trying to say to the brain, what's going on? What's going on? So our feelings get stuck in different parts of our body, sometimes in our head, the back, could be in our core, in our gut, stuck in our throat. Our cells, it's not really true. I'm just using a metaphor here. I'm getting playful to think about, like, how is our body trying to say there's a feeling here, pay attention. So how am I doing? What is the emotion? How does my body try to talk to me about this? Why am I feeling this way? So if I can look at how am I feeling, what's going on for me, then I can also start to discover the why. Play the tape of the day. What was it that got me feeling anxious today? I left my house 5 minutes later than I wanted to. Yeah, I said that silly thing in the coffee room, or whatever it might be that gets our brain feeling a little wobbly or stuck. And oftentimes we ignore ourselves. So we want to start having conversation with our feelings. Intellectually, this is hard as we age, but making time for hobbies, those things that are like feed our brain, making time to think, just being still and in contemplation can be very good for intelligence. Reading, even if you're reading on social media or you're researching cars, whatever it is, it's all good for our brain and our intelligence. But I will say that interesting people are interested in interesting things. So it's fun to give ourselves permission to say, well, what are those intellectual ingredients in my zone of wellness, in my self-care? And what am I really interested in that makes me feel like I am interesting and I have interesting things to contribute to the world around me in conversation, or just inside of myself? I feel proud of who I am because I like the things that I think about. Physical, a lot of it's about exercise. I just saw a video with Dr. Daniel Amen. If you don't follow him, you should. I think he's the best psychiatrist in the United States. He has a lot of good stuff on brain health, how to like take care of ourselves. Yeah, painting is a great thing. That hits a lot of different points on the wellness wheel. And Daniel Amen, he's a big advocate for physical activity. Yesterday, he was saying that we don't actually lose brain cells. Amen is AMEN. So easy, just like you're going, you're going to church and praying. Amen. Dr. Amen. And he's saying we don't actually lose brain cells. What we lose is our blood flow to the brain. So the more we can do things for physical activity, 10, 20, however many minutes daily, or however many times a week, that is going to help our brain, to help the blood flow, to keep our brain healthy. Our brain is such an important organ, and we tend to do things that aren't really great for it. And then as we age, we're going to have cognitive decline. So part of staying better in our window of tolerance, in our zone of wellness, is to take care of our brain. Healthier brain, healthier window of tolerance, better way to pivot emotionally, better way of being able, cognitively spry, all these things, to be able to move in relationships and in conversation, to better maintain our emotional regulation in the world around us, and to enjoy our lives. Healthy brain helps us enjoy our lives. Now, occupational, this is basically work-life balance. Like, how am I doing? Am I balancing my time? Am I taking care of my needs? Am I putting my oxygen mask on first so that I can be in connection with other people? So that I can be in connection with myself. And I think sometimes it's just worth looking at, like, where am I allocating hours of my day, and is this working for me? If I want to add in more reading, which is something that I've been working on mindfully, making sure I'm holding space for all the books that I want to read, then that's an occupational piece. If I don't make time for the reading isn't going to happen. So within the occupational, it's almost like there's a mini wellness wheel, in that, like, the work-life balance is so much about, where is my time going? And am I putting too much time into the things that are wasteful? Like social media reels, sometimes I get stuck in those reels, and oh my word, time can just disappear. And it's like, oh, what did I do? that's an occupational problem in my estimation. And then the spiritual dimension. There's a lot of good research. Again, Daniel Amen would be one, Dr. Carolyn Leaf. There's through the somatic people, the emotional regulation therapy, psychologists, and all of these mental health workers, that prayer and meditation is a way to cool down a hot brain. Having some way of really speaking and being connected in, creating space for stillness and solitude or silence. This is something we don't do as we've gotten so electronic focused. We have gotten less silent in our personal lives. Finding time, 2 minutes, 5 minutes a day, sometimes not listening to music or the radio when we're driving in our car could be an option. Sitting outside and just sitting, or sitting anywhere and just being present, looking at the world around us. Another really simple thing I think of for spiritual, this is also this, when we talk about the wellness wheel, it kind of all intermingles, is a feel good playlist. This is something I recommend to people often. And this year actually I did a 2024 playlist, and it's sort of songs that feel like they're a part of who I see myself as this year, and the feelings and the different ways of being that I am in. So those songs help me to connect into this emotional place that I'm in. But a feel good playlist. And the other simple spiritual activity that is pretty how is transferable no matter what we believe about who we are, even for people who don't believe we have souls or think that spirituality is kind of hooey crap. Oops, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. I think no swearing, but I don't know if that's a swear. Nonetheless, is pay it forward. So this idea of pay it forward and contributing to the people around us, paying it forward to benefit the immediate sphere of influence or the larger sphere of influence that we're a part of. So in our zone of wellness, our window of tolerance, that's our social, emotional, intellectual, physical, occupational, and spiritual self. And I in my original thesis, I talked about the metaphor of a balloon. So this wellness, it is really interdependent. And yeah, Spotify does have some great pre-made. Yeah, you're right. So in this balloon, that the 6 dimensions are like the air pressure, and the more balance we have, the more awareness we have of those 6 dimensions of wellness, and the more we're living in the fullness of who we are, flawed and fabulous, and still loving all of us, and still trying to focus on what is my version of cleaning up my side of the street, and how am I listening to those little cells that are trying to tell me that, you know, our world is a little unsafe inside this inner world. That creates more even air pressure in this balloony window of tolerance. If something's neglected, we can't just take a bite out of a balloon. We can't just cut one part out. If we bite a balloon, it pops. If we overinflate a balloon, it might just fizzle off and, you know, fly off somewhere, burn out. So we really want to be just mindful. What are the word pictures? What are the ways that we can help ourselves to get more intimately acquainted with this inner space, this beautiful cosmos inside of us, all the parts of who we are in our unique whole self, our whole flawed and fabulous and loved and included inner world. Self-love is I include me, so that I can be better equipped to be in relationship with others, understanding that I'm coming along other people who are whole people, flawed, fabulous, and wholly loved. And then just this grander experience of being a part of this all-inclusive human race, this human experience, that we all belong to an inclusive sense of love and responsibleness to the people around us. But self-care is a pretty powerful first step as we lead into more and more love energy with other people. All right, you guys. So that was some of that was all that I really was hoping to talk about. The one other thing I wanted to notice about window of tolerance before Riley can move into questions is what I find with mental health recovery, and when we're really, really struggling, those really wobbly moments, something heartbreaking happens in our life, the more our zone of wellness, our window of tolerance is informed by moral decisions, that really helps when we get rocky. And for you to consider not only your inner wellness wheel, those 6 dimensions that I mentioned, but also it's like, what are the good decisions that I really want to inform my sense of self and to draw strength from when the world gets unsafe for me and the people I love. That's bonus. Okay. Thank you guys. So Riley.
Yeah, amazing presentation, and I love that you took the time to go through the wellness wheel. I want to give folks an opportunity. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and write those in the chat. But just wanted to take a minute to go back to some of the tips that you gave us. In particular, we were talking about the spiritual aspect of the wellness wheel. And you talked about the meditation, the silence, having no music on when you're driving in the car. I absolutely love those tips. I find myself, I'm in my 20s, and I grew up in front of a television, in front of a phone all the time. And I find that for myself, being in silence is difficult. Um, so yeah, I just it's really interesting that you brought that up. It made me think for a minute. And something I wanted to add as a tip is even like if you take 10 minutes before you go to bed and you lay in your bed without your phone in your face or your TV on and your music playing, anything like that, I also think that's another great opportunity for self-reflection. Um, so thank you for bringing some awareness to that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's
Um,
beautiful. I'll say too, like I agree with you, Riley. So taking 5 minutes of quiet before we fall asleep is it can be uncomfortable, but we're trying to create a new neural pathway in our brain basically if we're not used to silence. And then the other thing is I mean maybe there's some Gen Xers in here or boomers, and when I was young, we would buy an album of music and lay on a bed and listen to an album from cover to cover or whatever it was. And so listening to music used to be a hobby. And now often people, it's like background or these different things with music. But that can be one softer way into trying to create a spiritual practice of contemplation, is doing one task at a time. Where somebody was mentioning art, painting and things like this, where just like, okay, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be in my body and doing this activity in a soulful way.
right. Amazing. I'm just reading the chat and saying she finds herself crying because she's so grateful and thankful for what and who she has in her life. Not sure why she's so emotional, but I am. And I just wanted to touch on that because I did have a question written down and it's totally out of left field. Um, but is there a reason why people cry? Like some people will cry because they're angry, and that's not really a reaction you might always expect. So, like, what is the science behind crying, if you can speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, our tears are a signal that, like I was talking about, somatic, like in our body, our emotions will sit in different parts of who we are, or our physical being. And tears are a signal that we are experiencing emotion. And there's a good chance that we're feeling a big emotion because it's leaking outside. And tears are one of the fastest ways to cool down a hot brain. If
Mm,
you pay attention, even when people are talking about being so full of gratitude and beautiful emotion that they're crying, or excitement, that afterwards it's beautiful to get into habit of noticing the the real de-escalation that we feel inside, that our
right,
brain feels, this peace with whatever emotion that we might have experienced. And I mean, the science, I don't know if I can say some sort of great research other than it's a big feeling and it's okay. I think one of my theologian friends will say that, spiritual people cry. And sometimes when we're in an epiphany, and a corrective epiphany is some language that we'll use in my attachment focus people group, is so there's this beautiful moment, something has completely changed for the better. That's a nice time to cry. And then there's other spaces where the feelings are so big and our body is trying to help to recover, so that we can get back into our window of tolerance.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Christine was asking, in therapy, I've been trying to learn about kind of connection between the physical body and emotions, but I find it hard to be aware of the body before the emotions go above and beyond and escalate. Any tips on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful question. So when our body is overwhelmed, sometimes we don't catch our feelings until aftermath, and that's just normal, the human experience. That happens to me, that I'll get emotional or I'll get irritated with my children, and mom face and mom voice show up. Those things happen. So if you catch it afterwards, that's okay. It's completely normal. Sometimes we'll talk about it as like backfilling. And if we have one of those moments where it's like, oh, why did I do that? Or I got so big feelings. I don't really like that I showed all of that intense feelings. We feel flawed. We feel shamed, maybe, or hard on ourselves. Just like take a meeting with yourself, take a few minutes to think about what happened, to pay attention. How did I feel? Again, those emotion things. How was I doing and why? Why was I feeling the way that I was? What emotions? Where was I feeling it in my body? And then we can consider, do we go back into that situation with people and do some repair? If there are safe people, we might go back in and talk about it. If it happened with unsafe people, then that's a little bit trickier, but it's more of us consolidating inside of us, and maybe processing through inner. Or let's say we had that, we lost our footing in front of somebody that we're not close with, person A. We could talk about it and process it and try to heal it up with person B, is something else. If there's some other safe person, a therapist, or somebody great at work, friend. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Yeah, Christine, I hope that answers your question. I do have one more here. Um, I saw somebody earlier saying that they don't like silence and because they overthink, and I believe that might have prompted somebody else to ask, what about using white noise? Is that better than silence?
I think whatever we're, again, it's that you are your own unique inner mystery. And if you don't like silence, that's okay. And you can figure out what works for you. White noise is fine if that works for you. Sometimes I really like white noise if I'm having moments of solitude. Like sometimes it's nice if a person's in the shower. That noise can be very soothing. It can feel cocooning and comforting to have the noise of water or the noise of white noise, a fan on. It That's okay. That's your call. You like it, great. You don't like it, that's fine. You like rap music, that's fine. You like instrumental, that's fine. Like, it's finding out what works for you.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, maybe that explains why I sleep with a fan on full blast even in the coldest day of winter. So that's amazing. I want to go back to this little PowerPoint I created. I will say, guys, Tara's a really great person to just like chat with. Like, I feel like we could just chat all day. But if anybody is interested, I have Tara's contact details on screen here. Hopefully you guys can see that, but I will include this PowerPoint when we upload the recording. So we have an email, a phone number, and a website as well. Tara, anything I should add here, or does this look all right?
I think this looks good. Inquiry or info at Sojo, either is fine. And we do
Okay,
have our YouTube is a free mental health resource. So if you go on YouTube, Sojourn Psychology, we have tons of videos on there. And then our Instagram or Facebook if you just want. I think that with social media, something good we can do for ourselves is try to find ways to interrupt the doom scrolling. I think it's great to add things like our Instagram onto yours, or other positive, Dr. Daniel Amen, Brene Brown. I like Bernice King. That's Dr. Martin Luther King's daughter. She's really lovely for social justice mindset. But to have some of those positive inspirations where it gets you anchored into the positivity. And then I saw somebody asking or noticing grief. And I think that that's also such a tender noticing, that grief is such a important experience and expression of emotion. And sometimes we do like anchoring, it's a fine if we play games like Candy Crush to sort of try to self-regulate, or to sometimes to have a little bit of a break. It's okay when the feelings are so big. Sometimes we want to move away into a bit of even what we call dissociation. That's okay as well. That there's a space where sometimes our body's so overloaded that repetition, some of the things that just like get us a little bit removed from the feelings, so that we can go back in and have a little bit more footing to touch those really, really big feelings. Good on you when you figure out ways to help yourself in the really dark, tough times.
Yeah. Amazing. And thank you so much to that team member for your vulnerability. I really, really appreciate and love that you felt comfortable enough to share that with us.
And Candy Crush is amazing. I'm just saying that is
Yeah. It's one of those
classic.
games.
It's classic.
Amazing. All right, perfect. And I wanted to as well share with you guys, if anybody is interested in picking up Tara's book, Love and Love's Energy, we have a couple links here on the slide. Again, I'm going to share that with all of you. I believe the Kindle version is the most economical. Is that correct?
Yeah, Kindle is $9.99. Amazon has hiked the price right up, and they've been a little tricky. I'm going to try and work on that and get that going a little bit better with them. But Indigo is, for the hard copy, it's $24.99. And I think you should, if you order it online, you could get it within a week, or you could order it into one of their stores. And then Kindle is $9.99. This book is very interactive. There's lots of stories, like the story I shared, some things about me, some things about people I know, lots of metaphor pictures like the Your Side of the Street. There's a few other big images or tools that I use in therapy, as well as at the end of every chapter. I think there's a few chapters in the beginning where I don't have them because it's the intro. So almost every chapter, there's self-reflection questions at the end.
That's awesome. Amazing. I look forward to reading that for sure. I know we have a bunch of readers here in this meeting today, so I look forward to hearing the feedback on that.
Yeah.
And Tara, are there any other resources that you think our group would benefit from, or anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
Any other resources? Well, I think it's always good if you or someone you love is struggling, to reach out to your mental health provider, or if you don't know whom to contact, you can always ask Riley for the number in your area. So in Edmonton 211, you can contact there for questions, trying to figure out different resources. I think being aware of your community, sometimes there's forums, like I'm a part of the Strathcona County Forum, and lots of times people will just ask a question on there to say, does anybody know a resource for partners with a depressed partner, or these sorts of things. Don't, it's scary to try and ask for help, but asking for help is important, and you are valuable. I also just think, try to, on your social media, put some positive things on there. Subscribe to some good YouTubes that look like they're going to be full of content that is inspiring. And yeah, social media, Instagram or TikTok pages or Facebook pages. And if they're not, then you can unsubscribe, right? That's fine.
Yeah, we have the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. I really appreciate your time, Tara. and I'll definitely be sure to come back to you if anybody reaches out with any additional questions.
Yeah, you're so welcome, you guys. Thank you. And then if you guys do, some of you guys read the book and you want to get me back to do a mini sort of book club thing, just let Riley know, and that sounds fun too.
Yeah, definitely. We're always looking for speakers for Wellness Wednesday sessions, so I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you in the near future again if you're so
Sure.
willing.
Sure, yeah. And feel free to give me Indigo reviews, good or bad. That's always helpful. For the book, for the book. I can ask for
I
reviews for the book.
I'm sure they'll be fantastic. I have no doubt. Thank you for sharing that tidbit from the book today, and that gives our folks a good insight as to what they can expect when they pick it up. So. Great. Thank you so much, Tara. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And Tara, I want to apologize for the issues with the camera. I'm not sure what happened there, but glad we got it working. We got to see your beautiful face.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, everyone. Have a great day. Take care. See you in a month. Bye.